Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Winter Wyvern. Winter Wyvern is a hero that's mainly focused around her ultimate. Her ult is a pretty big ultimate and can be considered a big team fight ultimate. It's also a single target spell, which is kind of unique because, usually big team fight ultimates are like these big AoE things like, Black Hole or Ravage or something like that. And this kind of is an AoE, but it is a single target spell. We'll take a look at that when we get into it, but yeah, this is mainly how the hero works. It's mainly centered around her ultimate. In terms of roles, Winter Wyvern started out as a support, but she also has been played mid and off lane. So now it's kind of any role suits her just depending on the patch. And the main difference between all the roles, between the core and the support version, is that the support version is going to use the ultimate to disrupt team fights, set up other spells, maybe, kill a support or isolate a very important hero like a carry when people initiate, where the core Wyvern can do all of that, but then also can use her ultimate to just kind of focus one person down and do a ton of damage to them just by yourself. So you're going to build your own damage items, not just like rely on the enemy's damage or your allies' damage or disrupting or stunning or those kinds of things. You actually do a bunch of damage yourself, and that's really the main difference. Otherwise, it's very similar kind of play styles, the core version and the support version. Then the other main thing to understand about Wyvern is that she's an anti-tank hero, because one of her abilities actually makes her right clicks do percentage-based damage. So you absolutely melt tanky heroes, whether you're support or a core. Now obviously, if you're a core and you build more, damage items, you're going to melt these heroes even more, so the tanky heroes are even going to have a worse time. But even as a support, you can do a ton of damage just by right-clicking a tanky, let's say the offlaner has, 4k HP. You right-click them a couple times, you use a couple spells, that does significant amounts of damage. You can't underestimate that amount of damage even from the support role when you don't have very many items. So that's the other main way to think about Winter Wyvern, as this anti-tank, percentage-based damage kind of hero. But before we can understand how to play Winter Wyvern, let's take a look at her abilities. So now that we understand Winter Wyvern in general, we can take a look at her abilities and see how she's able to be that good teamfight ultimate hero that also does percentage-based damage and percentage-based heal. So first we're going to take a look at Arctic Burn. Pretty straightforward ability. You just press it, and then for a while you see you can have this buff and you can fly over trees and over cliffs. You also have insane range. So you can see, look at this. I'm like doing damage and slowing this axe from a million miles away. I think Sniper's like the only one that can really compare to range when you have this ability up. So it's very good in that way. When you have it off cooldown, you're very powerful. You can get extremely aggressive in the lane or also in fights and those kinds of things, be very maneuverable and powerful. But then obviously you're pretty weak, relatively so, when you have it on cooldown. So just keep that in mind. That's Arctic Burn. Straightforward. It's one of these abilities that allows this hero to be a core, because I think if you didn't have this, you really wouldn't be able to be a core. It would just be a support. But this is kind of one of those things that allows, and it's still good when you're a support. Don't get me wrong. It's not like this is only a core ability. It's still very good when you're a support. Then we have Splinter Blast. So this ability is kind of your farming, creep wave clearing, ability that allows you to get some extra gold, that you're not just a single target based hero. So you can click this on an enemy and then kind of send out this ice blast, and then it hits things in the AoE around it. You can see this axe next to him took damage and was slowed, but the main target, really nothing happens to them. It's not a big deal for them, but everything in that AoE around them, it takes damage and is slowed, like I said. So you can see that this isn't maybe the best farming ability. Like, it's not gonna, because you're still gonna have to do damage to the creeps around it, and even that main creep, you're still gonna have to kill it and that kind of stuff, and it's not the best in that case, but it just adds a little bit of extra AoE damage to the hero in general. So that's Splinter Blast. Then we have Cold Embrace. This is kind of like an afterthought in some ways for the hero. It's not really tied to the rest of the kit in a lot of ways, but it is a good heal, because you click it on yourself and you just heal, and you're honestly immobile. You can't really move, and you actually don't take any physical damage either. So you can see this axe is attacking me, and really it does nothing, but you still take magic damage. So it's kind of like Ethereal Blade in that way. So you have to be careful, if you just use this and you're like standing next to a Zeus, that's not really going to help you at all. It's basically like Astral from OD, but you're getting healed, but you also can still take some damage. So it's like there's kind of downsides to it in that way, but upsides. And this is really good to not only delay when people are trying to kill you, like a right click hero is trying to kill you. That can be very good to buy some time, but also it can be very good paired with heroes like tanky heroes like an axe, let's say, or like a centaur, or especially I think the best one is honestly Spectre, because Spectre does so much with the HP that she has, that like giving percentage-based heal is just always so good. So you can turn fights and all that kind of stuff. Just make it a lot harder for the enemy to, go on those cores because it's a very good save. Now, it is something you can kind of grief your team. Like I said, if you're pressing this on somebody on your core, on your carry, on your mid, and they're just like standing there and just getting magic damage to death, you do have to be careful. This is one of these abilities that kind of increases the skill cap on the hero. So just be careful about that. But it can be good in a lot of situations. So that's Cold Embrace. And then we have the big focus of the hero, Winter's Curse. So I'll just press it on an enemy. It is a single target ability, kind of like the Splinter Blast in that way. And then this axe that's next to the main target actually starts attacking his ally. And that is the same for creeps or any enemies. Basically everything that AoE attacks that main target. And actually your allies can't do damage to those targets in the duration of it, but you can. I think that's another big thing that allows this hero to be a core, is that you can actually do damage in this like ultimate duration. If you weren't able to do that, I don't think this hero would be a core. It'd probably still be a support. And I think actually before, when it first was released many years ago, you weren't actually able to even damage during this, or maybe you were and then you weren't. I don't know. I forget exactly how it worked, but I think probably how it's going to stay right now is the way it is, because I think it's pretty balanced. It's just about the numbers, but you can see how this is very good for countering initiations. It's very good because it actually does go through BKB, that you can, alt A, BKB'd Faceless Void when he does Chrono, or an Enigma who BKBs in black holes. You can sit on the outskirts of the fight and cast this, has a pretty decent cast range, and counter a lot of these big team fight ultimates. So your big team fight ultimate is kind of a counter to a lot of the other ones, which is really good. But you can see how you might want to cast this on a squishy hero that's next to the carry, the enemy carry, and then they're just going to get deleted. Or if there's another squishy hero, some hero that you think that you can kill when you're a core and you have a bunch of items, you can just, cast this on them and then silence them and just do a ton of damage to them with all of your abilities here. So there's a lot of dynamic things and ways to use this ability. And then I will talk briefly about the Ags and the Shard. I'm not going to really show you the Shard. It's not a big deal. The Shard, you just use Cold Embrace, and then after it ends, you have a Splinter Blast that goes off. So this just actually increases your ability to farm and makes you do a little bit of damage. But it's mainly, honestly, for the farming. I feel like that's a huge thing. Is you just can use this on an ally creep next to the wave, and then it actually just pushes the wave a lot easier without you even being there. But then this Ag Scepter just makes Arctic Burn a toggleable ability that drains mana. So you can see now I just use it. There's no duration. It's just like taking my mana, which is really, really good, because you're going to buy items that probably give this hero some mana pool and mana regen. And this just allows you to do insane damage during the fight. So it's another thing that pretty much allows you to be a core. And if they took this away, I don't know how good the core version of this hero would be. It's still, like I said, be good as a support, but core kind of relies on all these different little nuances to the spells, and this Ags especially too, to be very, very good. So that is Winter Wyvern. Those are her abilities. Now let's take a look at how to play her in a game. Winter Wyvern's laning stage is all about harassing with her really insane range and percentage damage. So the rule goes, when you have Arctic Burn available, you can afford to get extremely aggressive. When it's on cooldown, you're going to need to play a little bit safer. And really the only other consideration in the laning stage is if/when you want to level your heal. When it's more of a passive lane, you're going to want to heal more. Let's say you do have a Spectre like I talked about before. You might want to, level heal level 2 or something like that. Maybe if it's a more aggressive lane, you don't really need the heal. It's not a big deal. You might not even put a point into it until much later. Then when transitioning into the mid game, you're mainly going to be using Splinter Blast to push and farm creep waves and kind of counter push and that kind of stuff. So you are a good hero for defending towers, because not only do you have an ultimate that you can kind of disrupt team fights if they dive, but you also can aggro creeps. You have good range. You can get out of the way and escape through cliffs and trees and all that kind of stuff. And then you can clear waves pretty easily with Splinter Blast. So Splinter Blast is going to be one of those abilities that you kind of want to level pretty early, because, or even max out early, because of that ability that it gives you to farm. And as a support, especially in most MMRs, you're going to want to maximize farming if you can. Then in team fights, your main goal is going to be to either ult an enemy core who is being extremely aggressive, or you're going to ult a squishy hero when they are next to a high damage right clicker. In the first case, you're going to use your ult to save an ally by stopping an enemy initiation. So let's say something like an Axe, or any offlaner that usually initiates just jumps in, or even like a Faceless Void, or even a Black Hole from an Enigma. You can ult those heroes, which is really good at countering a lot of those other big team fight ultimates in the game. So that's a really good way to understand, look at the game, look at the matchups, look at what you're up against, and then when you should use your ult, or if you need to save it for one of those ultimates. And then the other way is that, maybe there isn't anything like that that you can see that you're going to need to use your ultimate for in the game. So there is like a melee support that's usually going to be in there. You see a good opportunity when there's like a core, there's a carry next to a support or some other hero, even a mid, because sometimes mids can be squishy. You just cast your ultimate on them, and then boom, there you go, they're dead. And that's a good, easy kill to start off the fight, or even in the middle of the fight. And the other consideration is if you're playing core Winter Wyvern, are you going to isolate a target and kill them? Can you do that? Are you, far enough ahead in the game? Do you have enough items that you can do that? And if it's possible, then you can just pick the best target, the most useful target for the enemy that's going to, cost them the most to have deleted from the fight. You're kind of like a Doom in that way almost. You're just like, okay, I'm going to pick you, I'm going to kill you full to 0, or at least for the most part, eliminate you from the fight altogether because of how much damage I'm doing. I'm getting you really low, you have to retreat at the very least. And for the most part, I will say you don't usually want that to be a tanky hero, even though you are kind of like an anti-tank. It's usually not the best idea when you're playing core Winter Wyvern to just like ult the axe or the centaur. Like, that's usually not what you're going to want to do. It's usually like the mid or the carry that you're going to want to ult. And then, hey, maybe there is a very like snowballing support hero that's really important to the game that you want to ult as well. That's definitely a possibility, but just keep that in mind. Then later on in the game, and honestly throughout any part of the game, one thing you're going to want to focus on, other than the ultimate, is using your Arctic Burn to kite people in and out of fights. So going over cliffs, in trees. I've already talked about that a couple times, but it gets very important later in the game when you want to just dodge a lot of things. You can buy Force Staff and Glimmer Cape if you're a support, or obviously if you're a core and you do get an Ags, then that just makes it even harder to deal with you. And in a lot of cases, there's so many places on the map in Dota that have all these trees and cliffs and all this stuff. Around Roche, there's all these hills and everything, and that just allows you to get better angles for your ultimate as well. So you usually want to be sitting kind of on the outskirts and coming from an angle that the enemy doesn't really expect, so that way you can get off spells in a very good and efficient manner. Then the last two things I want to mention about Winter Wyvern are, one, you are heavily countered by Lincolns. Especially if you're a core, you're going to want to make sure you're keeping track of when the enemy is buying or on their way to buying a Lincolns, because if you use your ultimate on Lincolns, that's not going to be good, obviously. So you don't want that to happen, because that's, a huge part of your kit. So you just have to be careful with that. And people are often going to buy that ability against you, especially even if you're a support. Let's say you're playing against a Faceless Void or an Enigma, like I mentioned earlier, and one of your jobs, or your big job, is to counter their ultimates. Their counter to your counter is to buy Lincolns, and then it's very hard for you if they have Lincoln's BKB or something like that, especially on an Enigma. Then how are you really going to deal with that because not many other things can pop Lincolns through BKB. So you just have to keep that in mind. That is a counter to you, and you have to sometimes get creative in order to understand how to deal with that. And then the last thing to consider is your heal. And I haven't really talked about the heal that much because it's kind of an afterthought on the hero. It can be good, it is important, but the other reason that it's sort of an afterthought is it is the ability that allows you to grief your team. Because, if you use it on a core in the middle of a fight, and there's like a Zeus on the enemy team, it's like, honestly, if there's a Zeus, you probably don't even want to use the heal like ever in a team fight. But just in general, like if you're using this on a core, on your carry, and it's just like making them paralyzed, they can't move and they can't use their abilities, and they're getting turned on and killed, like it's just one of those that you have to be very careful about when you use it, and you have to make sure you understand, the opportune time. And if you're not very comfortable, if you don't know when to use it, if you feel like you're making mistakes, sometimes it might just be better to not use the ability at all sometimes. Obviously, out of fights, after the fight, when you're trying to heal people up, even maybe it's pretty simple to just use it on yourself to like stall. That's definitely an option, and not just like use it on allies. But that is kind of the big skill gap, I think, with this kind of hero. Is it can be very annoying to play against a Winter Wyvern that's effective at using his heal to counter initiate and to save allies. That's like a huge deal. But if you're not very good at that, you're really not using this hero to its full potential, and you can also grief your team like I talked about. So that's kind of the last thing to think about with Winter Wyvern. And that, everyone, is my Winter Wyvern guide. So if you liked the video or found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.